Welcome to the Behind the Curtain podcast, your real-world guide to real estate investment and property management.
In this special episode, Glenn and Brett profile the communities of Whitehaven, Raleigh, East-Memphis, and Cordova. They'll discuss details of each of the communities, the employment and demographics of the residents who typically live in those areas, and to help you understand the type of investments each area could offer.
All right, so today we're going to dedicate a good time, a lot of our time on dealing with the Memphis market and the different areas that you've heard about, that Glenn and I have talked about, Whitehaven, Cordova, Raleigh, East-Memphis, and we're going to kind of dive into the disputable census information that talks about...
Oh, it came from our government. We would never put that into dispute.
So we're going to talk about the number of white collar, blue collar, male, female. Can we say male, female anymore? I thought it was supposed to be male, female, think I'm a male, used to be a male, maybe I'm a female.
There's way too many labels now.
We're going to break it down for you so you understand. And we'll actually talk about market values and what the rents are going for so you can begin to understand a little deeper as to why if you come to Memphis, if you get a smart agent, they're going to be pushing these areas on you because they're moving that direction. So let's go to the first one, Glenn, which we were just having a conversation before we started recording about the Census Bureau information. So let's get into the numbers. Let's just run down them real quick before we get into the real meat of the stuff. So
Brett is holding that sheet way far from his face because he's got readers on. Can you
edit? All right. Yeah, I do have my readers on. So here's the thing. We're having a debate about white collar versus blue collar. Okay, for those of you who understand or don't understand Memphis is a distribution city, which means that a large majority of the people that live inside the city limits of Memphis are going to work at FedEx, Nike, Amazon. I mean, the list is huge because so many major worldwide corporations have their distribution centers here. So let's break down who those people are. So a guy that loads boxes at FedEx or works on a line is probably considered a blue-collar worker.
Yep.
And then the guy that's sitting up in the glass window, logistics manager, is considered probably white-collar. However, the guy running the line's making $30,000 a year. The logistic guy is making $38,000 a year. So while they're being labeled differently for job purposes, they're pretty much all in the same category. They're working for the same company, probably making in the same range of the same income. So one of the issues that came up in our conversation was white collar 63%, blue collar 36%.
Specific to Whitehaven. Now here's the thing. These are Census Bureau stats. Okay. You and I spend probably 2 days a week in Whitehaven.
Yeah.
At least.
Mm-hmm.
We're driving down there all the time, and we know our business, and we know Whitehaven. And so for me, I'm saying when the census says 64% white collar, is that what it says? Yeah, 64% white collar. I can't agree with that. Now, how you classify that,
right?
But the point is, Whitehaven is a part of town that, and we're going to get into this later, we're going to talk about anchors.
Yeah.
Anchors are important because these are the parts of town where there's something that brings about economic prosperity. I cannot agree with 64% white collar in Whitehaven. And I'm not trying to diss Whitehaven at all. I just know the demographics of what we do every day.
And I agree with you on that point, but when we were kids growing up, all right, white collar, blue collar was very clear. Blue collar were guys that swung hammers, drove tractors, worked at a steel mill, worked at a plant down in South Louisiana, a chemical plant. Those were classified as blue collar guys, right?
Yep.
And the white collar guys were like my dad. They were in sales, they wore suits, and it was very distinctive. But in today's political climate, blue collar, white collar has kind of been skewed.
Okay, so
let's argue that, for argument's sake, let's say that Anybody that works at FedEx other than at the corporate office is classified as more of a white collar worker. And the only
if they're at the headquarters, they're white collar.
Okay,
that's
they're probably viewing the logistics guy just got promoted to logistics and got a $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 a year raise. Now he's considered white collar, even though back in the day that'd have been blue collar because he's still working in a warehouse.
Right.
So that's why I think these numbers are skewed, because I believe that when people do their census, it goes back to, are you a garbage man or a sanitation engineer? You get my point? That when people answer the census questions, yes, I'm a logistics manager for FedEx. Well, Pam, they're going to classify him as white collar, even though he may not really be white collar. I don't care what collar he wears. I mean, it's a job. But I think that these numbers are skewed simply because of that reason. People create their job titles and make them as long as they can and as impressive as they can, because it makes them feel better.
Well, and the area that I did not agree with the census was Whitehaven. Okay,
right.
So think about the fact that EPE, Elvis Presley Enterprises, has put a lot of money into Whitehaven.
A ton of
money. They own Graceland. They own the surrounding area. They built I'm talking tens of millions of dollars.
Beautiful hotel.
And a hotel. All right, so the bartender, the wait staff, are they white collar or blue collar?
In today's, I don't even know. I don't know if they're male or female anymore.
Okay, so I think that skews the data, but it skews it in the right way.
Why don't we drop the white collar, blue collar? Let's just assume that whether they're blue collar, white collar, we know that in Whitehaven, your average person is going to make $50,000 a year and under. That's pretty much going to be average. Okay, so because of that, the rental base in Whitehaven is 50% of the homes in Whitehaven, according to the Census Bureau.
But that's true across Memphis.
Correct.
Okay. Well, the only place that I disagreed was in the white collar, blue collar. Okay. And that has to do with classification.
So let's just, for PC's sake and to be correct in today's political climate, just say everybody's wearing a tan collar. Right? Everybody's collar is just a nice mocha color. There's no distinction.
You can't say mocha. That's politically incorrect.
All right. Then it's an invisible collar. Okay. There's no such thing as a collar. Yeah. It's gone. So
we're not wearing shirts.
Exactly. Everybody's naked. So in that case, if you take 50% of the market is rental, I agree with that.
I do too.
You know, we know folks that own homes in Whitehaven who've lived there for 30 years, and we also have dealt with a lot of rental properties there. So when you look at Whitehaven, the thing is, you can buy a property for, it's gone up in the last 6 months, but let's say average cost $80,000, 3.2, 3.1.
Yep.
Okay, would you think that's fair?
Your typical, because if you look at the way the city is laid out, the age of the city, the houses in Whitehaven were built in the 50s and 60s. And back in the day, that was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, maybe a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath with a half bath in the biggest bedroom.
Yep.
Or very rarely a 3-bedroom, 2-bath.
Yeah, most of them are going to be 3.1s.
Yeah, 3.1, 3.1.5.
Standard little 3.1.
Same house you would find in East-Memphis that was built at the same time. 1950s, 1960s,
right. One
level, what we would call a ranch style. Mm-hmm. Okay,
that's the kind of house I grew up in.
Yeah, me too.
So I'm familiar with it. So if you look at the average cost of a home in Whitehaven today, about $80,000. I mean, 5 years ago it was in the 60s, right? Maybe 70.
Yeah,
it's gone up significantly for that market. The rent ranges on the houses that I've put investors in have been anywhere from $695 to $995 a month. And one house can be a 3.2 on one side of Whitehaven, renting for $700 a month. You put it on the other side of Whitehaven, it's renting for $995 a month. So it's the rent comps, I believe, are geographical as well.
But what do you think drives that difference, one side of Whitehaven to the other?
I don't know. It's a good question. There's theories that I have.
Well, definitely.
There's theories. But
rents are coming up.
Yes.
Okay. The market values have gone up over the last 3-4 years, but the rents have not followed. But now
they're catching up.
The rents are catching up. Now, why is that? Because the biggest thing in Memphis is the inventory.
Yep.
When you don't have enough inventory, it drives the market values up because you have more buyers than you have properties. But that doesn't mean that rents follow. Rents follow because of economic prosperity, and that's what we're seeing now. Is that we've had an improving economy for the last few years, but now those rents are following, and they're going to continue to go up as long as we have a good economy.
Now, here's what I want to stress: because there's a catch-22, and I get so irritated by people who wait for the stock market to hit its highest peak ever to start buying stock. It never made sense to me. And as soon as it drops $1, they start liquidating like the world's coming unhinged.
That's right. That's right.
I don't understand. So listen, the same happens in investment real estate. Right now in Whitehaven, right now in Raleigh, which we'll talk about that market later, market values have gone up. Inventory has dropped. That's causing rents to catch up. Now, as soon as rents catch up, what's the first thing that's going to happen to market values? They're now going to go up because everything's meeting the 1% and above rule. So therefore, sellers will ask more for their property. So you have a small window here of maybe 8 to 10, maybe 12 months to buy in Whitehaven and take advantage of the current values. Because if you wait until rents catch up, then the values start going up to buy.
You missed the boat, basically.
You missed the boat, yeah. I tell every single investor I have, you've got to move fast. You can't just sit on this stuff. You can't wait to see what's going to happen, because as soon as you figure out what's happening, guess what? The boat's left. And now you're sitting there buying a property you could have bought for $8,000 less a year ago and taking advantage of the increased rents that followed.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. Anyway.
Listen, when you're in real estate investment, you want to be living on the edge. And the way I mean that is everywhere that you buy, you want to be ahead of the game. If you go ahead and buy where it's hot, you miss the boat. You want to be on that edge of, gentrification is a bad word.
You should be driving the bandwagon, not jumping on it.
That's right. But when you're looking at where things are improving, you want to be right on that edge so that you get the gain of buying in early.
Yep.
So that your appreciation, your rent comps all come up as others start to jump on that bandwagon.
Exactly.
You don't want to be on the bandwagon when it's already
full. A lot of
full.
Investors are bandwagon investors. They are. They wait until they see on national news that, Memphis is, one of the hottest rental markets in the country before they start buying here. And we've got perfect example that you and I we've been going back and forth on that fourplex. That I try to get your investor was trying to sell it. He was ready to get rid of it a year ago. I was trying to have my investor buy it. My investor I don't know. And I said, listen, this is one of those things that you're going to miss the boat. So he didn't buy. Your investor ended up not selling, hanging on to it. It's gone up $60,000 in the last year.
Yeah,
and
he bought in at like $325.
Yeah.
And then the last time I talked to him, he said, I'm not letting it go for less than half.
It's gone up to $385,000.
Yeah.
And it's fully rented, producing almost $4,000 a month in gross
because
rent.
He bought on the edge.
Right.
He held on to it. And yes, there were some difficulties. But the point is now he's not going to let it go for less than $500,000.
And my investor kicks himself every day that he didn't jump on that deal. Yeah. Now, the reason being that this deal worked out the way I'm trying to paint a picture of what we're talking about, getting in early. So when this investor bought this fourplex, it's on a dead end street, a lot of duplexes and some multi-family apartment buildings. All of them were in bad shape. Nothing was great. It wasn't a great street to be on. However,
that's right.
The one right next door to this fourplex, completely renovated in full. They're now doing the one across the street. They're building a brand new apartment complex on the other side of that one.
Yep.
So now this value has shot through the roof, and this street has become a desirable place for young professionals to live, and his building is full. So while I don't think he realized he was buying on the edge and getting in early, but now I guarantee you he's so happy you brought that property.
Oh, he did, because I said
and my investor's pissed off that he didn't buy that property.
That's right. And the thing is, when I talked him into buying it, I thought, I sure hope I'm right. And I was.
You are. It took a couple of years for you to be right.
Yeah.
But so it worked out. Anyway, so that's the thing we're trying to talk about is what Glenn does, and he's good at, and I try to ride his coattails on it, is finding that next spot that's coming, finding that next spot where a glimmer of light's starting to shine, where we know that if you start buying in there today, the next 5 years, values are going up, rents are going up, and you can take advantage of not just a good ROI, but take advantage of a good appreciation value on a property that's going to give you a fantastic return on resale.
That's right.
So anyway, before we move on to the next topic, EPMRealestate.com. You can go there, contact Glenn and I directly if you want to learn more about the Memphis market, Whitehaven.
And if we're talking about Whitehaven, one of the things that's important, what I call my anchors, Graceland, where Elvis lived, is the anchor for Whitehaven. Now, why is that important? Well, back in the 1950s, when he bought that property, it was in the country. And it's not in the country anymore, it's in the city. And when Priscilla Presley sold her rights to Graceland to Elvis Presley Enterprises, they brought economic prosperity to Whitehaven. They bought up all the strip malls and the little hotels across the street. They put in a beautiful hotel. That hotel had to cost them at least $50 or $60 million. We're talking about a 5-star hotel. Graceland is now one of the highest grossing tourist attractions in our country. And that's all because of the investment that they made into Whitehaven. And a couple of years ago, they came out and said that they were going to pay all of their employees, and I'm talking thousands, a living wage. And that has generated economic prosperity to Whitehaven. That's the anchor in Whitehaven, and that's why you should buy there.
Absolutely. Well, before we move on to the next location, I want to bring something I find interesting. So let's take, you've got 37,830. Let's just call it 38,000 people that live in the geographic space of Whitehaven.
Yep.
How big would you say Whitehaven is? A couple miles by a couple of miles? 3 by 4? What?
Yeah, probably 5 miles north to south and 3 to 4 miles east to west.
Okay. So it's not a huge area.
No, it's not.
Actually, we can get through Whitehaven in a matter of 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
However,
and do on a regular basis.
Let's take
every week.
that number of 40,000 people or 38,000 people, and 50% of those are classified as renters, which means that at any given time, you've got almost 20,000 renters in that geographical area.
Yes.
And if that doesn't tell you how popular Whitehaven is for rental properties and investors, that should be a key indicator. And you're going to find that as we go through the Memphis markets, if you continue to listen, that a lot of these areas are going to be 50%. And when you look at the population, think about how many people every year are looking for a rental property just in that area, that small geographical area,
yes,
which is why rental properties are so popular. I just want to point that out. So anyway, we're going to move on to the next location. I believe next we're going to talk about Raleigh.
Okay, sounds good to me.
So Raleigh, and when we mention these names, I believe at some time this is what these little towns used to be called, and over a long time ago they got annexed into the city, but they're still called by their geographical location. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you look at Memphis is a river town. So when Memphis grew, it could not grow to the west because that's where the river is in Arkansas. It couldn't grow to the south because of Mississippi. It couldn't grow to the north because of Shelby Forest, which is a federally protected land area. So it all had to grow east and south, and so Whitehaven became the mecca in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
Raleigh began to come up after that, and so Raleigh is the north side of town, and that is where now we have economic prosperity coming from Nike,
right, and
from Amazon.
Yep. Well, let's look at that population. Population 36,531 with a 56%, almost 57% renter occupied. And I agree with that because I do too. There's very rarely a homeowner there. Now Raleigh's another geographical size similar to Whitehaven. It's probably only 3 or 4 miles wide, maybe 3 or 4 miles north or south.
About the same size as Whitehaven, but on the north side of town.
So again, you've got 18,000 renters in that small geographical area. So,
but there's a difference in the age of the homes that are there.
Yeah.
Because you have some that were built in the 50s and 60s.
Most are 60s and 70s and even 80s.
And you even have some that were built in the 2000s,
Further
just
north.
before the crash in 2008.
So while the demographics are pretty much the same, the type of tenants are pretty much the same. They're all employed in distribution: Nike, Amazon, FedEx. Not all, but the majority.
You have two facilities, Nike and Amazon, that sit right next to each other on New Allen Road. Nike's got to be 1 million square feet. It's huge.
I clocked it in my truck.
Did you?
When you hit Nike, if you hit your odometer and wait until you get to the other end of Amazon, they take up a solid mile of real estate.
Yep.
Together. They're next door to each other.
Yeah.
So it's a solid mile of real estate they take up with their two facilities.
Yep.
So
and they're right next to each other. And the Amazon facility, Nike's been there for years.
You think Amazon gets a discount on
Nike
shoes when they
Nike
ship?
apparel? Probably so.
They just walk next door and say, "Hey, I need 2 million of these and 3 million of those."
But I also know that you have a lot of Nike apparel.
Yeah, I'm slowly getting rid of it though.
No, the Amazon facility opened up within the last year. They hired 1,000 people. And so you put that right next to Nike, which is at least 1 million square feet.
Right.
You're talking about thousands of employees and what I would refer to as blue collar. Doesn't matter to me. It's just
we agree nobody has collars anymore.
No collars.
You're politically incorrect.
We're all naked. Okay, but those are two of the anchors for Raleigh. Just like you have Graceland in Whitehaven, you have Nike and Amazon in Raleigh.
Right.
Okay, and so that's what's sustaining the economic prosperity of Raleigh.
Yep. And the uniqueness about most of these areas, so, we had talked about Whitehaven earlier, and family households there are 63%. Family households in Raleigh, 63.27%. So you can see whatever market you're going to, the demographics are about the same as far as family units, non-family units, citizens, non-citizens. All that is going to be kind of the same. The difference between Whitehaven and Raleigh is that Raleigh is doing what Whitehaven did 5 years ago.
Yep.
So Raleigh's the place, if you can find a house to buy, is where you want to be investing because you're going to have the appreciation, you're going to have the up rents. Now, the average home, from my perspective, from what I've been doing in Raleigh, is going to be between $68,000 and about $85,000 average.
I agree with that.
And your average rent in Raleigh, though, however, is different than Whitehaven. It's a little higher.
Yeah, it's going
So your
up.
average rent's going to be $895 to $995. I have some that are even as high as $1,100. We have one investor that bought a house. Rent comp said max was $1,025. 2 days after we finished it and put it on the market, he rented it for $1,150 a month on a 2-year lease.
And that's a trend that we're seeing.
Yeah, inventory's low for renters, so they're doing the same thing home buyers are doing. They're saying, I'll pay $1,100 a month. I'll pay $1,150 a month
because they've got a good job at Nike or Amazon. That's cliche, but the point is these anchor areas, they create a situation where your workers are going to be able to pay more rent.
Yeah. Well, and people are going to move closer to work, right?
Yes, absolutely.
These folks that worked at Nike on the other side of 240 forever, when Nike opened up a new plant or a new distribution center, then all of a sudden, instead of driving an extra 10 minutes to work, they're looking to rent another house in Raleigh.
Yeah.
But you've got 17,000, 18,000 renters in that area. Yeah. Between Whitehaven and Raleigh, you've got 38,000 people that rent.
Yeah.
Period.
And the comparison is if you look at Atlanta or Houston, where it takes 2 hours just to drive across town, in Memphis, you can be anywhere you want to go in 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And as a result, if you're talking about living in Raleigh and working in Raleigh, you're within 3 or 4 miles of being at work. And that's what makes Memphis unique, is that people live in that part of town. Many of them have never lived anywhere else other than that part of town. Yeah. and they're within just a few minutes to commute to work. Now, we don't have a good system for commuting. We don't have the greatest bus lines in the world. We don't have a subway. So people have to have a car. So for someone to be within walking distance or at least driving distance, 3 or 4 miles from work, is
very important.
It's very important.
And, let's face it, Raleigh's 10 minutes from downtown, 15 minutes from the airport.
Yep.
Raleigh is more centrally located than any other section of Memphis, in my opinion. You can get to anywhere in 10 to 15 minutes.
And portions
other than Whitehaven,
and portions of Raleigh are in the county, not the city.
True.
So you don't have a city property tax, which improves your ROI.
Yep. Exactly. Well, again, epmrealestate.com. You can hit up Glenn and I, and we'll be glad to talk to you further about these markets if you have any other questions. But listen, get into the markets early. Please don't wait until it hits a peak, and buy on top of the market so that if you have any kind of correction, you're at a loss. Get into these markets early. Whitehaven's starting to level off, but I still think there's a good potential of growth there. Raleigh is growing at such a faster pace than I thought. Well, we could have bought for $75 last year. Is on the market for $85 this year. Mm-hmm. Within a year, they're putting them on the market for $10,000 over what they were getting last year.
When we talk about the age of a home, a lot of people are like, well, I only want to buy something that was built after 2000.
Well, then get your checkbook because it's going to cost you.
Well, and the reason is they think, well, that house is going to have newer stuff. Well, let me tell you this. If you take a house that was built in 1960 and you put a new roof on it and HVAC, water heater, flooring, it's new. Just as new as something built 10 years ago.
I always tell my investors this. If you have a 16-year-old son, you can buy him a Ferrari or you can buy him a beater, and it's his first time. Which one are you going to buy him? They say, I'm going to buy him a beater. Why? Because he's going to tear it up.
He's going to tear it up.
Okay. So if you buy a house that's $250,000, it costs more to fix that house up when you turn that renter over as well.
Yeah.
Versus a $70,000 house that you put $3,000 or $4,000 into and turn it over.
Yeah.
So keep in mind it's all economics of scale. All right, so we're going to go on to what we got: East-Memphis and Cordova. Let's move into Cordova next.
Okay.
Because we were just kind of discussing that. So Cordova was the town of Cordova. It was also annexed into the city of Memphis relatively in the last 10 to 12 years. It hadn't been that long.
It's been on and off. And when we talk about parts of town, Raleigh, Whitehaven, Cordova, these are areas that are mostly a part of the city of Memphis, but not always.
Right.
And they were just named as suburbs back in the day. Because we could only grow from what? West to east.
Yep. Annexation.
Okay. So Raleigh is mostly city, but some county. Whitehaven is all city. And Cordova is about, I would say
80% city, about 20% county.
Maybe 70% city.
Which all that's going to mean to you is that your taxes are going to be less, so your ROI will look a little better.
That's right.
Pretty much.
And so Cordova was actually a little crossroads at Macon and right in the Macon and Germantown Parkway area back in the day. And when I like 100 years ago. Now it's a very sought after suburb of Memphis where you have a very, very diverse demographic of naked people because we don't have collars anymore.
Well, let's look at the difference between Cordova and, let's say, Whitehaven and Raleigh. White collar is 81.39%. Blue collar is 18.6%. Self-employed people compared to 681 in Whitehaven, 2,268 people in Cordova. But you have a 56%, almost 57% rental rate of all the houses in Cordova are rentals. So what does that tell you? In my opinion, that tells me that now you've got guys that are upper management or low-level management at FedEx, low-level management at Nike.
They either work for Delta Airlines, or
they make $50,000-$60,000 a year.
Yeah.
They haven't bought a home, but yet they'll come to Cordova and rent a $180,000 house for $1,500 to $1,800 a month.
Yes.
Because they can afford that. So, and because they're getting into a home that it was built in the last 15 years versus something that was built in the 70s. So that tells you a unique. Cordova is the place you go if you want a newer home. You're going to pay more for it, and your ROI is not going to be as great. You can still get in the 8s probably, but you're not going to get into the 10s and 11s because the property values have so far exceeded what the rent comps were. Now we're seeing rents go up. So buying Cordova today is going to be a good long-term hold because values are going to go up and rents are going to catch up.
And we have investors that will only buy in Cordova, and that's just that's their niche. These are newer homes that were built from 1990 up until the early 2000s, right before the crash. Now, what's unique about Cordova is there's not a lot of new construction. When the market crashed in 2008, there were some lots still left available, but mostly throughout the Memphis market, you're talking about existing homes. And so Cordova, and let's talk about the anchor in Cordova. What's the anchor in Cordova?
EPM Real Estate. I don't know if there's Shelby Farms. Shelby Farms Park.
Shelby Farms Park is a 4,500 acre park right in the heart of the city that you have to either drive through or go around every day.
There's hiking trails, bike trails, fishing holes, dog parks. There's even buffalo.
Yes.
I show people the buffalo.
They're
They're like
bison.
Bison. Well, what's the difference?
I don't know.
Bison?
They are bison. You don't get buffalo in North America.
Okay. Well, sorry. I didn't know there was a difference. Can you eat bison?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I show people that, and they're just shocked.
You can't kill the bison at Shelby Farms Park.
I won't kill the bison at Shelby Farms. Not unless it's been a long night and I've been out having a good time. Then I'm not responsible. But I show them, and people are shocked when they see them because it's just not something you expect to see in the middle of Memphis.
You expect to see it out west in the plains.
Correct.
But we have a herd of bison.
And the bison are smaller than buffalo. I guess that makes sense because I did notice that.
They're not small enough to pet.
No.
They're very large.
There's deer that live out there that cross the road. I see them all the time. There's a solar farm. There's agriculture. You got the Agri Center, which they hold a lot of events.
Yes. The Agri Center actually is a kind of a unusual place because they actually do a lot of agricultural experimentation. So they grow trees. They have a strawberry patch that you can go out and pick your own strawberries. Yeah. They have a lake. It's called Ketchum Lake, where you can pay like $1 and go in there and fish.
Catch catfish.
You catch fish to take them home.
It's really a cool place to, it's a large park. It's a lot of area, a lot going on. They just built they dug or widened an existing lake.
Yep. Patriot Lake. They beached it. They rent paddle boats, and I mean, you go out there on a day like yesterday when it was 76 degrees and sunny, and that park had to have 4,000 or 5,000 people in it just around the lake. They have walking trails. They have places for the kids to play. So they have playgrounds.
The Green Line goes through there. The bike trail.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Trail. It goes right by your place.
Yeah.
So it was an area that was provided to the city by a family here in town, and the family said you can use this and as a park, but you can never do anything else with it. The city had to agree that they would never use Shelby Farms Park for anything other than the enjoyment of the citizens. But
they do have a couple of Shelby County offices, buildings, DMV, and the penal farm over there.
Yes, there is a prison.
There's a prison, and a dog shelter. We left that part out. But, I mean, it's not. It's where they send guys.
Minimum security.
Right. It's where you go.
That's been there for many years.
DWI and
But you've got governmental offices over there. The Shelby County Sheriff's Department has a building over there.
Google Earth it. If you Google Earth it and look at it, it's really cool. It's really pretty, and I always think back. We had one of the Japanese investors in town, and we drove through there. And keep in mind, in Japan, I didn't know this until he told us, Japan, they build up. So you have a 5,000 square foot house, but it's like 6 stories tall because you can't build. You
There's
build
not
straight
enough
up.
land.
So when we go through Shelby Farms, I think we were taking him a lunch at the Coastal Fish House, and his eyes were just like big as saucers because he couldn't believe all this vacant land that no one is building on.
We took him up on the top of the hill that looks out over the park.
Yeah.
And he just was wowed.
And that's when he said, he goes, I have a 5,000 square foot house, but it's like 4 or 5 stories tall because you can't build out. You have to build straight up.
There's no land.
No land to build on. Anyway, so Shelby Farms
that's the anchor. That's the anchor for Cordova,
right,
which has brought economic prosperity back.
And let's be honest with people, Cordova, you're going to get someone who makes a little bit more money. You're going to get a higher rated tenant, right? Maybe a little bit better credit score. But however, you're going to rent a $170,000 house for $1,550 a month. So your ROI is going to be 7 and 8. It's not going to be 10 and 11
today.
But
it's going to improve,
but it'll catch up. So you take a short term lower ROI to take advantage of the appreciation and the growing rents that are coming in the future. But you get a solid tenant. That's the key. Now, not every tenant's going to be solid. We still have our issues, but not as common as you would in a place like Whitehaven or Raleigh or the other side of East-Memphis, close to the interstate.
Well, but if you talk about that, I mean, Enterprise does such a great job of making sure that we vet our tenants.
Yeah.
You know, back in the day, back in 2008, you could get a loan as long as you had a heartbeat. Nowadays, with tenancy, you're going to vet your tenant to make sure that they have the ability to walk out the lease that you sign with them. And so Enterprise does an excellent job of vetting those tenants to make sure they're going to stay in there through the length of the lease and probably be there for as many as 10 years. I've got a house I'm getting ready to put on the market. The tenant was there for 10 years.
I got one. The pastor's been there 8 years.
Yeah.
The one we were just talking about before.
Yeah.
Actually, we helped him back at RMC. I just realized that.
Really?
Yeah.
That was our old company back when we were in.
Well, I'll tell you about him.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get on to the next one, which is East-Memphis. Now, East-Memphis is the most, in my opinion, is probably the most popular area other than Midtown.
Yes.
Midtown's gotten so it's so overpriced that you can't live there anymore unless you've got serious money. But East-Memphis is still that place. It's segregated by Poplar Avenue. One side's bigger homes, old money, $500,000, $1 million homes. The other side of Poplar are these little 1,200 square foot brick 70s homes.
Same house you would find in Whitehaven, but it's in East-Memphis.
And in great condition, most of them.
Yes.
The only downside is that house, if you took a house, put it in Whitehaven, you sell it for $80,000. You put it over in East-Memphis, it's going to sell for $140,000, $150,000.
Yeah.
However, the rent will justify there because
there's
a lot of young professionals, young married couples that just get started and they want to live in East-Memphis. They can't buy $1 million house, so they move over to that side and rent a home, and they'll pay $1,300, $1,400 a month for a little 1,200 square foot 3-1 house
and love it all day long.
Exactly. And so you can buy that house for $140,000 and cash flow it because it makes sense. Now, the unique thing about East-Memphis that I noticed, if you look at the self-employment numbers, 1,724 out of 42,846 population. Private company employees, 13,852. Okay? If you compare that percentage-wise to population, it's still on track with what Whitehaven and Raleigh were at. Mm-hmm. But you look at the white collar versus blue collar, it's 77% white collar. Why is that? They work at the hospital. They're clerking at a law firm. They're not making a ton of money, but they're on a track, a professional track that's going to take them years to achieve.
If you have friends in Memphis, let's say you have 10 friends,
right,
and you ask them where do you work, you're going to hear St. Jude, AutoZone, FedEx,
AutoZone. Forgot about that.
Delta. One. That's what you're going to hear. And I have so many friends that it's exactly that. We are a city that is based upon the types of companies that headquarter themselves here. And why do they do that? Because the cost of living is very reasonable. And so you have...
And we're centrally located for distribution in this part of the country.
Absolutely.
From the river,
Which
the
is
railways,
that's where we started to begin with.
Yeah.
Because we were a river town where they brought cotton in and out of through the barge system on the Mississippi River.
Our railway junctions here, and now we've got I-40, which runs from the east side of the country to the west side of the country.
Yes.
It runs right through the middle of Memphis.
Which I personally drove from Las Vegas to Memphis when the 2001 situation occurred.
Ooh.
Yeah. I-40 all the way.
Well,
27 hours.
Yeah, not me. So if you want to understand why that's a big key for Memphis, then East Memphis sits right, other than East Memphis is the opposite side of 4240 from Raleigh.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But they're both within 10 minutes of downtown. They're just on different sides of the interstate.
I grew up in East Memphis.
Yeah, I remember. So if you look at the population, you look at the white collar numbers, which I found was interesting. It's much higher. Not much higher, but it is significantly higher. But yet they can pay $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 a month to rent a little 1,200 square foot house.
Yes. And if you look at the numbers about households without children, 75%.
Yeah.
And that's a mixture of things. That is
smart people.
You can go into East Memphis and you'll see Granny out there cutting the yard. She's 70 years old and she's only lived in that house.
Yeah.
And then you have people who are up and coming
when I was
doctors, lawyers.
Yeah. When I was leasing properties over there, it was always young married couples in their early 20s.
Mm-hmm. No kids yet.
She's a nurse. He's, in law school or, no kids.
Yeah.
But they don't want to live in Cordova. They don't want to live in Raleigh. They want to live in East Memphis. East Memphis is a place to be. If you're anybody, you live in East Memphis, but they can't go across Poplar and pick up a $500,000 house yet. So they move into these neighborhoods. I lived over there. Back in 2017, 16, 17, and 18.
I don't want to talk about when I lived there.
It was a long time ago.
Now, actually, if you look at a map of Memphis, you see Poplar Avenue that runs all the way across town. And so in East Memphis, on the north side of Poplar, those are areas where it's more affluent.
Yeah.
And you'll actually have somebody buy a $250,000 house and tear it down and build a McMansion. But on the south side of Poplar is what we're talking about, which is the 1950s and 1960s ranch style 3-1, 3-1.5, 3-2s that are anytime you can get
$150 a square foot on average.
Oh, easily.
On average.
If you can get one, you pick it up because it's only going to get better. That's just the way East Memphis runs.
Sure.
Anything on the north side, very rare.
Yeah, I agree.
That's where they actually will either tear something down and rebuild or take an old house and add to it.
Right.
Go up 5 stories.
That covers the markets that we work in. There are other markets we can talk about, but that kind of gives you a rundown between the newer homes, the higher rent, the upper level tenant versus the mid-range home, a little bit less expensive but better ROI. And Memphis is a unique city. It's a really unique city. Go to epmrealestate.com, look up Glenn and I, just hit us an email, call our cell phones, whatever. We'll be glad to help you get started here in Memphis. That's what you want to do.
And you can look at some of the anchors we've been talking about. If you just Google Graceland, or if you Google
Shelby Farms Park,
Memphis, Park, Tennessee. Or the Civic Center in Raleigh, which is a new anchor.
Yeah,
you can actually check out these areas.
You can look up the Amazon Nike facility, and I think you can see that from the space shuttle or the space station. I believe you can see them.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Curtain podcast, your real-world guide to real estate investment and property management. Be sure to subscribe at BehindTheCurtainPodcast.com. And if you'd like to learn more about Enterprise Property Management's real estate services, please visit us on the web at epmrealestate.com. This has been a Sound Ideas Group production for Enterprise Property Management, Inc.